All right, almost ready with the live stream. All right. Let's see. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I think we probably have at least one more person who was going to jump on. So if it's all right, and we could wait just a couple more minutes, I think we'll be ready to get going.
Not if we're waiting for Mike Davenport. Is that who we're waiting for, Jared?
Indeed.
Michael. Okay.
Sorry, I totally froze during all that. Is Mike joining us tonight?
I believe so. He indicated he would join tonight. I think Andy might join as well here in a second. I know he was at a separate meeting just before this.
Okay.
I'm with you, Chair Vickers, to start whenever you say so. This is your show. Those late to the party have no one to blame but themselves.
That's a good point. We'll give him one more minute.
That is true.
That's fine. No, I only say that because I know Mike well, and there you look. There he is. We were saying all nice things about you, Mike, and especially me, knowing you would come on at any moment. So you probably can't hear me yet. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
There we go. We're all good.
Okay, I am going to call this work session of the HPRC on February 15th, 2022 to order at 5:18 p.m. Can I make a change to can I add something to our agenda real quick? We have a member here who is not reapplying to be on the HPRC at the end of his term. So I'm going to turn it over. Rick, I'll let you jump in.
Hi. I received my notice in the mail for reapplying for the position, and I respectfully am not going to reapply. I notified our chairman, Megan, and am graciously stepping down. I've much appreciated my tenure here. I'm planning on retiring later this year, and I am planning on doing a whole bunch of traveling, and I don't think I can give a fair amount of commitment to this job and do what needs to be done for this committee and the city. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to excuse myself from this meeting, and I just want to tell everybody that I've really enjoyed working with you all, and I wish you nothing but the very best, and I think you do amazing work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you for everything you've done, and enjoy your travels and your retirement.
I will. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye-bye.
Nick.
Thanks.
Thanks.
That was nice of you. Thank you.
Okay, so then our first agenda item is a general training with our city attorney, Carmen Beery, who is here. So I will mute myself and turn it over to you, Carmen.
Megan, do I need to be sworn in as a member, or is that part of your bylaws?
Go ahead, Jared.
or Carmen. I did want to make a couple comments on this. Tonight, we do have a new member of the HPRC, Michael Davenport, who was nominated by the mayor and approved by the city council on Monday. So we're happy to have him. We also have with us this evening Rachel Turi, who has submitted a letter of interest to join the HPRC. Unfortunately, we were unable to get her nomination onto the agenda for Monday's meeting. So we're hoping to do that here shortly, but we did want to invite her to this meeting because it's a training and I think it can be applicable to everyone. I am not aware of a swear-in requirement though for HPRC membership.
Okay,
And yeah, I'll add, fair question, Mike, but you know, we're doing like a work session here. We're not asking you to take formal action here tonight. Neither you nor Rachel, who I understand is not officially appointed yet. So to the extent that we are merely asking you as commission members and commission members to be, that we're merely asking you to listen and ask good questions and not vote on anything. I think you're okay in either event, whether an oath is required or not.
okay.
So fair question. I appreciate you raising it, but I think you're good to go.
Okay,
Hi, everybody. I'm familiar with most of you already. Again, Rachel, welcome. I understand, and I was given a heads up that you're an interested applicant, perhaps a commission member to be, and so appreciate you coming. You, just like any of the public, as we will talk about later, can attend and listen to and view these meetings. You have the added bonus of being someone who's dialed in to pipe in and raise questions if you want. Certainly don't have to, but welcome to the potential group here. So again, yes.
I was saying thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, sure. Great. Fantastic. Feel free to pipe in at any time. And that goes to all of you. I know you've got a few things on your agenda. It's my goal to, as efficiently as I can, hit the topics that I outlined for you that I would this evening. Jared then has some additional planning specific topics to cover with you, as well as a couple of other issues. The Saving Places Conference, you're going to discuss your meeting times, perhaps when you would like staff to queue those up and when you'd like to hold those. So I know you've got a few things to do. I am but one of them. So I will try to, as efficiently as I can, get through the topics I think are maybe the high points that I'd like you to hear. And then you can ask me any questions that you like, and throughout, please feel free to interrupt me and ask any questions that you like. And then my goal is to maybe half an hour, if that, 20-25 minutes. I think we all, including myself, learn best in little chunks of time, and anybody's voice becomes a little bit monotonous after a while. So I'll try to get through my stuff and then kick it over to Jared for his stuff. And finally, if at the end of all this tonight, or my portion, there are additional questions you have as HPRC members, additional legal issues that you would like answered or would like some further explanation on, please do feel free to reach out to really to either Jared or Andy, and they will make sure that your question and desire for more information gets to me, and that I can address that for you either individually as a group. So kicking it off, let's start at the top and cover some basics. And again, I hope that y'all have, and there was no reason to, study or really dial down on the memo that was in your packet from me. I really wanted all of us to sort of just have a roadmap of the things I wanted to talk about. So starting at the top of that memo from me on training topics, the scope of HPRC authority, and even more basic than that, I think a lot of you know, because you recently, well, two of you recently applied. Who's the HPRC? Let's start at the very beginning, as they say in The Sound of Music. Julie Andrews, a very good place to start. Who's the HPRC? You're a 5-member board or commission appointed by the city council. You're actually authorized to have up to 2 alternates as well. I'm not sure how long it's been since we've had that many people to have 2 alternates, but when it comes time for you to vote, you're a 5-member board. We always want odd numbers, right? To try to avoid ties on votes. You, I believe, are the only city board or commission that does not have a residency requirement. In other words, you all don't have to be residents of the city of Idaho Springs. That is unique. And I think it is a nod to the very particular expertise that this commission has, and that the city council wants this commission to have, that we realize may not just inherently be in 5 to 7 people who live in the city of Idaho Springs. We sure like that to be the case, that we have residents, and we do on this board, but sometimes we have non-residents as well. What the code expresses and what council really values is this preference that members of this commission have some expertise or interest in historic preservation, whether that's by training or membership in other groups, or I think the code just says an overt expression of interest. When we, as a city, like this and value this group of people as those that have some unique training experience, knowledge, or interest in historic preservation, because you do a lot of the heavy lifting in regards to historic preservation in Idaho Springs, a city that has a lot of historic significance, right? So council and the city rely on you group of people to really be the experts in that. What are your roles and responsibilities? Really, there are 2 main tracks in that, 2 main responsibilities and duties that you have under the law as HPRC. The first is, and quite frankly, the least frequent, petitions for historic designation. There, as you know, we do have, right, a historic district there that's established, that's already been designated. So you, as the commission, don't have to redo that periodically. However, you may be called upon as a commission sometimes to designate additional historic sites of historic significance. I can't remember the last time that happened or we got such an application, but commission members, you may be called upon to evaluate a petition for designation, historic designation. When it comes to those kinds of petitions, your role is really much like the planning commission often is in the city, to review that application and make your wise and interpreted recommendation to the council on whether or not that designation is appropriate. So that's your role, is to review and make recommendation. Your other main area of responsibility, and what is far more frequent, existing commission members know, is to decide on COAs, certificates of appropriateness. And whenever a building permit is sought on a historic property in the historic district or its own site, whenever a permit is sought to add a new structure, to make exterior modifications to a structure, or to demolish an existing structure of historic significance or in the district, that building permit, before the city will issue it, the applicant for it must obtain a COA, a certificate of appropriateness. And that is to ensure clearly that the work that is to be done, right, whether it's new structure, demo, or exterior modification, that's outward facing, right? That's clearly going to be a visual aesthetic impact, that kind of work, rather than I'm redoing my kitchen, right? That permit would not need a COA. This permits that are clearly visible, that will cause impact to the historic district and to people's view, have to get a COA. That this commission, and your role in this regard, you are the decision maker You conduct the hearing on those applications for COAs, and you, as a commission, issue the city's final decision. Subject to appeal, which we'll get to later, but you are the decision maker at first blush. You are the ones to whom application is made. Jared vets the application, writes you a detailed staff report, and you conduct a hearing on those applications for COA and decide. So in that way, again, the outline notes, council really delegates to you and trusts in you their role of historic preservation expert. That's what they count on you for. So pivoting then to the next item on the agenda, conduct of meetings. And this I'll buzz through because it's really that these are more kind of maybe practical issues rather than legal issues, although they do intertwine. But when it comes to the conduct of meetings, following the agenda and having an agenda is very important because of the Sunshine Law, the Open Meetings Law. And I'll touch a little bit more upon that on the next highlighted or big topic. You'll notice in your meetings often, on our business meetings, we have might have business items like offering input on certain plans, downtown master plans. The city might want your input on that. Council might want your input on a considered or proposed change to the regs the code sections that you deal with. They might want you to vet those code amendments they're thinking about. Those might be items on your agenda. Things like discussion of future meeting times might be on your agenda, like tonight. Those are items of either legislative or administrative in character, I would call those things. Those are either sort of business items that are administrative you need to take care of or that we want you to take care of, or you're looking at potential law to make recommendation to council on. In contrast, and again, we'll talk about this more, sometimes you might have a quasi-judicial matter, not a legislative matter or administrative matter. And those matters require that you conduct a hearing that is in many ways more formal than the other things that might be on your agenda. Voting duties and responsibilities, I would just real briefly say, unless there's a good reason not to vote, vote. And we'll talk about good reasons not to vote later. But you, like the city's variance board, have the very difficult job, and we as staff and council recognize that. You folks have the very difficult job of sometimes having to say no to people who really want to do something to their property. And it's sometimes emotional. We all probably at some point maybe have owned properties and know what that's like. You are in the tough position to sometimes have to say, what you want to do with the exterior of your property, we just doesn't meet the guidelines that we are bound by law to apply. And it might be hard, right? And it might cause the applicant a lot of sadness, all right, or even anger. And we get that too at the city a lot, unfortunately. But it is your job to sometimes say no. And that can be difficult. But that is no reason to not be a member of this board and to not vote, even when that's a hard thing to do. So again, the city so appreciates, as we did Rick, and all the time he served us, even though he didn't re-up, good for him, he served us well. But we recognize that you perform a very important function that is hard. And if you've signed up for this to make those hard decisions, stick with this and please do that and vote and participate and come unless you have a good reason not to. It's part and parcel of what you signed up for. So finally, making motions, a real practical note. I find that in particular, new board members are sometimes intimidated unnecessarily by the idea of making a motion. And it's please don't be. And also, please don't think that there is magic to it or a right or wrong thing to say. Honestly, when it comes time to make a motion in a hearing, usually Jared is nice enough to end his staff report with suggested motions. So you can just read what's on the end of the staff report, and that could be your guide. In other contexts, it's just as simple as saying, I move to fill in the blank. So it even does the trick to say, I make a motion to fill in the blank. Sometimes I hear that. All of that is fine and good. All of that is okay, so long as we as staff can note in the minutes and that we can make a record of what you intended to make a motion to do, what you intended the action of your group to be. Other than that, don't sweat it. Again, there's no special legal magic dust that you have to sprinkle on it or know from me. I move to, whatever it is you want to say. And if we as staff really want you to use some sort of particular language, we'll provide it to you. That's what we're here for, is to support all of you as commission members. So pivoting to the next main topic, the open meetings law, or the sunshine law. I alluded to this a little bit. You, just like the city council, are subject, and just like every other formally constituted board or commission in the city, you're subject to that law, that sunshine law. And it is a Colorado statute that requires that any meetings of 3 or more of you, and you're a group of 5 voting members, so 3 happens to be your quorum as well. For city council, they're a 7-member body. 3 or more of them is not quite a quorum, so they need to be a little more cognizant of this. But for you folks, just know, when a quorum or more of you have a meeting to discuss matters of city business, those must be noticed, right? Your agenda, what you're going to talk about, has to be posted in advance, so the public knows a couple things. They know that you're going to meet and talk about city business. They know what city business you are going to talk about. And why that's important is they have a right, the public, to come. And in this day and age, whether that's maybe come via Zoom or the live feed, we always are obligated to figure out a way, COVID or not, to allow the public to attend meetings of 3 or more of you when you meet to talk about city business. That is also important, that you're meeting to talk about city business, because I don't know the 3 of you or 3 or more of you in any way personally. But again, we do have city residents on this commission, and you may indeed have other groups you belong to, church groups, school groups, parenting groups, whatever, volunteer groups. I don't know. I don't need to know. All you need to know is that you can still interact with each other outside of these meetings and run into each other in the city and even belong to other groups without violating the sunshine law, so long as you don't, in those other groups, talk about city business. So no big deal. Just refrain from the temptation to talk about historic preservation if you see each other at the grocery, and you'll be fine. Another important reason for the sunshine law, right, is so that there can be a record made of your meetings and the public business that you discuss. This is a meeting called a work session, not a regular business meeting. Without getting into the whys or delving into the sunshine law too much, meetings like this, we do record. However, Wonder here is not obligated to make written meeting minutes of work sessions, right? It's only your business meetings where you take formal actions and do formal things, where we do also have a legal obligation to do written minutes and a written record, again, for the public's benefit, of what was talked about and any decisions that were made in a decision-making meeting. the whole idea of the sunshine law, right, clearly is that the sun must shine on everything that we do as government. No decisions in particular can be made in private or should be made behind closed doors outside of the light of sunshine. There is an exception to that under the sunshine law. There's an exception to all discussions and decisions. Well, all discussions must be visible by the public, and that exception, broadly stated, is the potential to have closed door discussions called executive sessions. There, under the law, are a handful, more than a handful, maybe two handfuls of reasons why any public body might have a closed door, public not allowed discussion. There are a limited number of categories and reasons and topics that we can cover in exec session. Among them, personnel matters of a limited scope, matters that might be subject to negotiation, like agreements or property acquisitions that council might be contemplating, matters that are subject to attorney-client privilege, lawsuits, yuck, that we're either already embroiled in or might be threatened. Those I can talk to city council about in closed door, which I should be able to, right? Because we need to maintain some attorney-client privilege. So in the little menu of items or topics that you all might have occasion to have an executive session about, probably attorney-client privilege is the one that springs to mind, if ever. But that one you might have used to employ sometime. And by that, I mean, if you have a topic on your agenda sometime, whether I'm there or not, if it raises some legal questions that you want some legal analysis and advice on, you'd tell Jared, and he'd let me know. And at your next meeting, probably, I would meet with you in some sort of executive session. The law requires us to notice those in a special way and to call those in a special way. There's an example of when we as staff want and need you to say some magic words. When you or council or anybody has an exec session, I provide you with the magic words to say to allow us to go into exec session. But this group probably won't do that very much. But I do want to mention it because there are some limited circumstances when I can get advice to you or you can get information in a privileged way. Moving on next to public hearings and the quasi-judicial process. So going back to your two main roles of responsibility, your two main areas, make recommendations on historic designation, right? Recommendation to council, or your main category of responsibility to conduct public hearings and make decisions on COAs, applications for certificates of appropriateness. When you conduct a hearing on a COA application, you are acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, not a legislative or administrative capacity, but quasi-judicial. What does that mean? Just sort of like what it sounds. You're acting like a quasi-judge, jury, fact finder, and ruler on a particular issue. Now, it's not an alleged crime or an alleged civil dispute like a judge in a courtroom. It is instead an application from a property owner asking you for permission or for the go-ahead to do certain things to her or his property, right? To get that building permit. So you are tasked then to conduct a hearing on that. And just like a judge in a courtroom, you're tasked with formally constituting the hearing, calling it to order. The chair gets to do this hard work, calling it to order, and then following the certain order of allowing people to present their case, including city staff, including the applicant or owner, including the public, having those people sworn in. And that, again, sort of process that you follow is different, right? And a little bit more formal than other kinds of discussions that you will have. Because you are acting as judge and jury, quasi-judicial, because you are acting in that capacity, there's some very important legal ramifications that attach to that. And they're important to me because they better be there. These safeguards better be there from my perspective to defend it, to make sure it's good and legal. And these considerations are important to you because they affect sort of how it goes on your end practically. And the legal attachments, right, that come with a quasi-judicial hearing all relate to this idea I'm sure you've heard of called due process, right? The legal idea, the legal notion of due process to all. What does that mean? In the context of a hearing like this, it means that the people who have a legal interest in the outcome of that hearing have certain rights, rights under the law that others don't, that we need to make sure we protect as a city. And generally speaking, those people who have those legal interests are the applicant and usually neighboring properties, adjoining properties, and or if it goes beyond adjoining properties, those properties who are entitled to individual notice. When we mail notice as a city into individual owners, and there's usually a radius around different kinds of applications where Jared and Wonder send out notices. Hey, neighboring property owner, someone's applied for a variance across the street from you. Hey, property owner, someone's applied for a COA next door to you. Those immediate neighbors, those really close neighbors also are legally interested parties. They have legal rights too. And the applicant, of course, has legal rights. And they have the right to do what? They have the right to attend the hearing. They have the right to present witnesses and evidence to you. They have the right to make legal argument to you. They have the right to appeal your decision, whether that's to district court or to another body, and I'll talk briefly about that. They have, in a very general way, and this leads to the next topic, they have, like anybody else would in a court of law, they have the right to expect the judge in their case to come to the case without bias and to be completely neutral at the beginning, right, of and throughout, but until the decision-making time. They have the right to expect the judge in their case to come to the case as a clean slate without bias, without prejudgment, right? So those legal rights of due process attach and belong to parties with a legal interest. So we need to protect those rights no matter what your decision, to approve or not approve. If we protect those rights along the way, right, and we follow the law to get to whatever decision you reach, the decision you reach will be defensible, right, at the end of the day. And that's the goal, clearly. So let's talk a little bit more about that last legal right, that last due process right I talked about and mentioned, which is right, the idea that the decision maker will not have bias or not have any predisposition. A big way to inadvertently perhaps be accused of bias. And that's as important as having bias, because the appearance of it will be inferred by the appearance of bias that you have if we can't overcome that. And a common way to do that, even inadvertently, is to have what are called ex parte contacts. What those are, ex parte contacts, are communications about a pending application or a pending case that you're going to sit in judgment on outside of the hearing, right? And those are often, right, a danger and something that is really perhaps unavoidable in more for you than, let's say, for a true judge in a courthouse, or even someone sitting on a state board, or maybe even our county commissioners. But for you sitting on a city board, having ex parte contact is really something that is a true risk, because again, many of you live in this community and are residents of this city. And many of the applicants who come before you are also residents of the city. We're a smaller city, and you may see an applicant from time to time in your daily life even when you know that you are going to be 2 weeks hence or a month hence, you know you're going to be conducting a hearing. And that person is the applicant or the applicant's representative, the applicant's architect, the applicant's engineer, the applicant's consultant. You may know that, they may know that. And boy, gee whiz, on their end, isn't it great to run into you and have the opportunity to potentially say, hi, I know you're on HPRC. I have a COA coming up, your June meeting, and I want to tell you, blah, and they just start talking to you about their application. That's an ex parte contact. If, and this is also an if you know, and we know as a city, that you're going to conduct a hearing on their application, that we've got an application in hand. That is the point at which there's really a hearing to be had, right? Otherwise, maybe couldn't talk to anybody ever because I have grand plans to redo my building in the historic district, and I haven't gotten around to actually getting the plans together yet, but I will, and this is what I want to do. Well, the theoretical that may apply someday. While you need to be kind of careful about those things, right? Because you don't want to hint, oh, I'd love that, or I'd vote for that. I mean, you don't want to sort of forecast that you feel a certain way about it, but under the law, until we get an application from someone, we don't know that we're going to have a hearing. We don't have a ripe issue, right? That we know that you're going to hear and decide on. But when we do get that application, when staff knows it, you know it, we've told you at the prior meeting, hey, next month you're going to have a hearing on XYZ, which we will do as staff, just so you know, right? So when you know you're going to have a hearing on a particular application, and someone who's interested in that application, again, the applicant, their representative, a neighbor, shoot, even not a neighbor, but a member of the public who has a very strong opinion about that application. They want to share it with you. When they approach you outside of the context of the hearing, or if they approach you and say, again, hey, I want to bend your ear for a sec because I know what board you sit on and I have some input on a COA that I know is going down next month. As politely as you can and as quickly as you can, try to get yourself out of that conversation and cut that person off and say, I'm so sorry. I'm glad you know I'm a commission member because I got to tell you something important as a commission member. I can't hear this right now outside of the hearing. I can't be the only commissioner who hears it. I can't hear it when everybody else, including the applicant or neighbors, can't hear it. I can't hear it and it not be on the record. That might go up on appeal. For many reasons, I can't hear this outside of the hearing. So please come to the hearing. That's the place where we need your input and we want your input. But please come to the hearing because I can't hear it outside of that. For a lot of, I'll get in trouble. Blame the city attorney. She'll be really upset with me. And as politely as you can, try to steer them towards coming to the hearing, not to discourage them from offering their input. We want it. We need it. We want that on the record. But we can't have it outside. You in particular are compromised if you get ex parte communications like that outside of the hearing. Why? Again, you're receiving evidence that the whole group doesn't receive. It doesn't become a part of the record on appeal. Remember, that's a big thing for due process, a clear record on appeal on how the decision was reached. Another reason that puts you in the hot seat when you get ex parte communications, you're hearing evidence that maybe someone who doesn't agree with it doesn't have the opportunity to rebut and say, that's not true, or it might be, but let me tell you this. This is a mitigation of what they say. Everybody has the right to sort of hear what everybody else has to say. And the only place we can ensure that happens is at the hearing, right? So that's what to do. And I know it's easier said than done often, But that's what to do if you are approached with someone who wants to give you ex parte information. Please steer them to the hearing. And if they say they can't come to the hearing, I have, pickleball that night. I don't know. Hey, no problem. If you provide your written comment and feedback in advance of the hearing and get that over to Wonder or Jared in time to get in the packet, we can still provide your comments in writing. We don't discourage that or say folks can't do that if they really can't make the hearing. Okay, so there's an avenue to cut them off if they say, no, you need to hear this because I can't come on Wednesday night. No. Okay. I'm going to real quickly, because it's approaching 6 here. I'm going to real quickly cover appeals. Well, I'll cover bias too. But appeals has been an issue lately because we recently had an appeal of an HPRC decision. I can't remember the last time we had one, really. And it was a funky little thing. And for those of you who remember it, and even those who don't, this is new to you. I'll real briefly explain what the heck happened there and what the appeal avenues are for your decisions. When, again, and this is, you render decisions on what? COAs, right? You're the decision maker. You give recommendations on historic designation to council, but for COAs, you decide. So what if someone is unhappy with your decision? There are really two avenues we discovered. When you deny a COA, just flat say, nope, no. Your application for a COA for that particular work under that particular building permit is denied. Our city code is quite clear that denial is an appeal that goes to the city council. And our city council would review your decision. Funny enough, the code is a little less clear. What happens if you approve a COA with conditions and an applicant doesn't like those conditions or condition? What then? Well, gee, what we discovered as staff, and it was incredibly interesting, was that there is no appeal avenue to city council for approval of a COA, but with conditions you just don't like. So someone in that position really has two options from there. One is to appeal your decision without a local avenue. They could appeal to district court under what's good, a Rule 106 appeal under the Colorado Civil Rules of Procedure. There's a Rule 106 that allows for applicants of local bodies like you or city council to appeal those local government decisions when there is no other appeal avenue locally. So you can appeal to district court, or we discovered if there's an allegation that you, HPRC, or Jared, or Wonder staff are misapplying the law, are misinterpreting the rules. You misinterpreted it in the condition you imposed. Or you impose a condition and Jared is interpreting your condition wrong. In either of those events, an owner arguably has the right to appeal that to the variance board, the city's board of appeals. That's what happened recently, as you all know, who have been on the commission for a while. And the variance board then reviews the decision and issues a determination on whether or not the condition that you imposed was appropriate. So that was odd, I will admit. That's not common that there are two so distinct appellate paths. And quite frankly, that might be something that we as a city want to change in the future. And quite frankly, something that you might, under your own direction and decision and consensus, something you might want to kick up a recommendation to city council on. There's nothing that prevents you from, as a group, telling the city council, hey, we think maybe the code that affects us on this topic or that topic should be tweaked a little bit. And here's our input. Council will review that. I don't know that they'll change the law, but it's within your bailiwick to make recommendation on laws that affect you, right? And so that's an example, this weird appellate sort of thing that we discovered. Finally, again, it is 6 now, so I'll again quickly try to cover this, but I do think it's important, although it touches on some things we talked about already. Bias and legal conflicts. I just wanted to mention bias in that harkens back to the idea of ex parte communications and the guarantees of due process, and making sure that anybody with a legal interest knows that you all are impartial. Ex parte is just one way that folks can accuse individual commission members of having a bias. Hey, I know Davenport's biased against me because I saw him talking to the neighbor who I know hates me. That is an accusation that I'd say, geez, Mike, did you talk to the neighbor? And if Mike says to me, yeah, I did, and she was talking to me about growing, her hydrangeas or something, I don't know. Great. Then they weren't talking about the substance of the hearing. We can establish that on the record. If that accusation is made during the hearing, we'll explore that and talk about that and sort of see if there is an issue there. But that's a way that you can be accused of bias. There are many ways that you can be accused of bias. And those are that just, I know that Chair Vickers hates me. She has since junior high, and she's biased against me. That's kind of a flat out accusation. And again, if it was made in the hearing, we would talk about that and see if Chair Vickers really does have some sort of a bias. There are, I think, some things, some factual circumstances that without anything more probably reveal a bias, whether or not you believe in your heart they're there or not. And those are if you are like the spouse of an applicant, you're probably biased. Whether or not you think you could be neutral, we would probably say, why don't you recuse from this? If we're lucky enough to have an alternate, we'll have someone fill in. Even if we're not, we'll carve you out of this, because the bias will be imputed to you and to the group by your participation by virtue of your spouse being the applicant. So bias can come up with relationships or procedurally, ex parte. There are also, there's also an issue of legal conflicts of interest. And those might overlap with or be distinct from the issue of bias, but a legal conflict of interest is when you indeed do have some skin in the game, as it were. Most frequently, that means financial interest in the outcome. That might be you own the property. That might be that you're the architect, consultant, representative of the applicant. That might be that you own property that's competing against the applicant. Let's say recently, right, the last COA we had was for the Lodge Hotel, place of accommodation. And they have some grand plans to open that thing up as a beautiful hotel. Let's say one of you, and I don't know if you are, but let's say one of you owns a competing hotel or lodging establishment in the city. You're not the applicant. You don't have a direct financial interest in whether that COA gets approved. However, I think it's easily argued by someone from the outside, hey, they're competing, right? They have a competing interest. They have financial skin in the game in not wanting another competitor here in Idaho Springs. That person has a conflict here. That's probably true. So sometimes it's not as direct and obvious as you're going to make direct money from an application, but maybe you'll receive the benefit of them of a competing business not succeeding. That can be a legal conflict of interest as well. There are some state statutes that outline and expressly prohibit having a conflict of interest as a local official. I mention that to you not because you have to memorize it or anything, but know that if you do have a legal conflict of interest and you don't disclose it, we don't know about it, and we don't take you off of the decision making process for that particular issue, not only do we risk having our hearing and decision invalidated after the fact, just by virtue of you participating, you do also face criminal prosecution and some criminal consequences, right? So it's very personal to you too, if you were to fail to disclose a conflict of interest. Yes, Chair Vickers.
A question on that. So if, for instance, that we know somebody does have a conflict of some sort and they don't disclose it, does that fall to, for instance, me as chair to bring that up to you? Does it fall on city staff to address that? I just want to know what level of responsibility we have as commissioners versus what city staff has.
Yeah, I would say if you as commissioners know about that, or even think, right? Please tell us as staff. And maybe this is your point, sort of, how does the procedural how does it go, or how does it flow? If you let us know as staff, guarantee you, we'll see if we'll do our part right, not in the context of a public show to embarrass anybody or call anybody out or do anything like that, but we will talk to that commissioner and maybe not even tell us who told us, right? We can be, as kind and discreet as possible with everything. The point is, right, to maintain the integrity of the commission's decision. And so to your point, what's your obligation? I think your obligation is to tell us as staff if you have concerns, and we'll take it from there and then explore that, right, with the person who we need to explore it with. Now, I'll tell you, you can lead that horse to water, right? I have had a situation where I've spoken to folks about, I think you have a conflict of interest here. And I can't think of an instance where someone insisted they did not, right? I think when faced with legal counsel telling you, don't do this, you need to not participate, most folks take that. Not sure I've ever, which is not to say that it would never happen that someone would ignore that advice, but I've never seen that happen. So hopefully with strong sort of admonition that there could be serious consequences, again, to the individual, right? I mean, it's not just, well, I want to participate and I don't think that's true and I'm going to vote anyway. Okay, I'm telling you should not. I'm telling you think there's a legal issue here. If it's to the level of, I know it certainly is, I have an obligation to bring that out of the hearing. Well, that'll be embarrassing for everybody, including that individual. And there might be personal criminal consequences for that. So
so you prefer, as opposed to us addressing that person directly, we should come to you and let you address them?
Well, yeah, I think so, because then we know, right? I mean, if you were to have that conversation and we as staff didn't know, holy heck, we'd feel a little caught off guard at the hearing. Hey, I'll say this, Chair Vickers, at the very least, even if you do, and if you are comfortable, I mean, if you really have a good relationship with that person and you are comfortable saying, hey, I think you've got an issue, then do both.
Okay.
Feel free to say something if you're comfortable, but do go ahead and let us know as well.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
I see Lisa also has a question.
It's not so much a question, it's more of it goes back to what Carmen was saying about our appeals process. And even though I think that appeals process over the past year was definitely a bit sticky, I don't think it was a bad thing, because it allowed for the idea of bias to be brought out in the open, and this gave the property owner a method of relief. I mean, had they gone to the appeal through the appeal process and not gotten what they wanted, it still would have been an avenue for them to, you know, go beyond what they did or did not get from the commission, if that makes sense. Like, I think it was definitely messy, but I don't think it was a bad thing, because it allowed that owner to move forward, you know, to all avenues beyond just our commission.
Yep. And that's I see it, Mike. That's very important, again, in the, not only relationship wise, I think you point out there's value there to someone who gets to have their argument heard on appeal, regardless of outcome. There's value there to that person. But on top of that, it's a legal mandate that we provide that avenue. So, Mike, yes.
Back regarding the ex parte contact, what some other historic boards do is at the very beginning of the hearing, the chairperson asked, has anyone had any ex parte contact? And then has anyone had has a conflict of interest? And that way it's part of the record.
Right. Yep. And we achieve, you can maybe suss out unknown or last second ex partes in that fashion. It's certainly preferable for, I think, everyone, us as staff, the unwitting chair of the proceeding, to know about those things before, 2 seconds before the hearing. Again, that's a valuable way, I think, to sort of know about the last minute things, or the things we had no idea about. I do encourage you to reach out to us as staff if you know those contacts have occurred. And if I failed to mention that, let me mention that too. If and when you get an ex parte contact, not only should you do your best to shut that person down pretty quickly, you should also let us know as staff. Because if you can't unring a bell. And so if someone just unloaded on you and gave you a bunch of information before you could stop them, or they sent you an email and the subject line was like, how you doing? And then boom, you can't unsee what you've seen. And they email you a bunch of stuff that is substantive to the hearing, and you can't unsee it. What do? Forward that to us as staff. That's, again, akin to the kind of thing like alleged bias. That's the kind of thing that if we know about it in advance, we as staff can figure out if anybody needs to step down. And if you don't, great. If you do, that's fine too. But even if you don't need to step down, we as staff can figure out how to get that on the record in the right way so that it's not a problem, and so that you can continue to sit on the commission, and we can get that evidence in. Yeah, Mike.
Another question on contact. What is the proper way in terms of if there's contact either before the application is submitted or after the decision has been made, whether it's the applicant or someone else wants to talk to you? They say they know an application's coming up, they know it hasn't been submitted yet. What's the rule either before or after either before the application is submitted or after the decision's made?
Before an application is submitted, I alluded to this, it's not really a ripe quasi-judicial hearing yet before an application is submitted. And so, to be fair, again, folks may project their grand plans to you, or not even grand plans, but project what they know is coming but hasn't been submitted. Even though that is not a ripe legal issue and a hearing that's scheduled and something that is live, let's call it, that takes away the technical legal issue of ex parte, right? At that point, before we have an application, you can't have communications outside of the hearing because we don't have a hearing. So while the technical legal issue of having an ex parte contact or communication has not materialized yet, What you do always have is the issue of potential bias. That can happen anytime. You can, again, alluding to not to pick on her, but alluding to Chair Vickers' junior high nemesis and the allegation that she knows that she just hates her. That can exist and be alleged before that person files an application. And my point there is, if someone communicates with you, even though an application has not been filed, that's not ex parte. That's not necessarily something you legally need to let us know about as staff, although we would appreciate knowing about that. The real danger there is, from my perspective, that that person comes away with a feeling of they've just influenced you. That puts you in a position of potentially expressing something that they take away as, hey, they like my idea, they're going to vote for me. Oh, they said that they hate my idea and they'll never vote for me. I'm going to remember that. And when I do file my application, I'm going to bring this up again and say, see, Lisa told me she would never support such a proposal. Well, shoot, we got a problem now, don't we? Even though we didn't have an application when that conversation happened. So be mindful and careful about those conversations and about expressions of anything that could be interpreted as bias in those conversations, even before an application. After an application, Mike, if someone wants to talk to you, well, I hated your decision. Why did you make that decision? You can tell them why you made that decision. I don't have any problems with that. The decision is made and you made your decision on the record and the why is on the record. And I would encourage you to encourage a person who has questions about it to maybe review the hearing. Someone is just really mad about it and wants to vent about it, that's okay too. Generally speaking, you don't have a further role. However, just like before the hearing, just be careful that you not say something that could be interpreted by that person as evidence that you made up your mind before the hearing, right? I mean, after the hearing, again, we don't have ex parte issues because the hearing's done and concluded, but we do always have the issue of someone saying, hey, this commissioner said this to me, which shows they made their mind up well before the hearing. They had it in for me from the beginning. I had no chance. Those things can be said at any time, and that's what you need to be careful of.
Then our last question on this area. What about one, several, or all of the commissioners visiting the property, which obviously is outside the hearing?
That's a good question, and that is okay. Site visits in the land use context are fine. In general. Now let me give you some additional admonitions on that. If you as a commissioner want to go see with your own eyeballs the lay of the land or the state of the building that exists or whatever the application might concern, you want to go out that and view that with your own eyeballs, that's okay. The law allows for that. That's not it's sort of like the kind of thing that a judge could take judicial notice of. What day of the week was Easter? Was Easter Sunday? What date was Easter that year? A fact that is objectively viewable and verifiable is something that a judge can take judicial notice of and just know and view and see. If not presented, even though not formally presented in the hearing, the state of property is kind of like that. In other words, you all could go see something with your own eyeballs that everybody else can view too. And that's not like getting evidence outside of the hearing. That's an okay thing for you to do. It is not the same at all as having a conversation outside of the hearing that other people can't hear. You all can go and see the same thing with your own eyes. So, you want to go see something, go on a site visit and sort of look at something with your own eyes? That's okay from my perspective and staff's perspective. Be careful you don't do that as a group of 3 or more, because we know that's a meeting under the sunshine law, as we discussed. Could 2 of you go? Sure, that's not a meeting. So if you wanted to go, that's fine. I would encourage you to go individually if you can, however, because there will be a temptation if you go in groups of 2, even though you don't technically violate the sunshine law, there'll be a temptation to talk to each other. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? And oh boy, you talking to each other, right? You're communicating about the subject of the application outside of the hearing. Don't do that to the extent that you right? The communications that you can get outside of the context of the hearing, reduce it to this: communications with staff. Ask Jared questions. You want to know something? Ask Jared if you can know it, and ask Jared if he can address it in his staff report. Communications with us are not ex parte. I don't know if he's next to me on your screen, but he is on mine. Communications with me, Jared. Oh, I'm this way. We're communications with us are okay. We're here to serve you. So, but please refrain from talking to each other. The site visit thing is a common question. That's a good question, Mike. Yes, ma'am, Chair Vickers.
That brought up something and you may have covered it, but I don't remember. But emails, we have to be really careful with emails as well, under sunshine laws. So we should not ever be replying all to each other. And again, I think there's that issue of, like, if it's, hey, can we meet at 6:15 instead of 6? My understanding, those are okay to have reply all, because that's administrative, but we can't have any conversations over email even between us. If we need to have anything that is over email, we need to go through staff. So I would send it to Jared, and then Jared could send it to everybody else.
Great point. And a perfect segue into the very last bullet point on my memo, which is the Open Records Act, or CORA, Colorado Open Records Act, which, quite frankly, Chair Vickers, as you brought up, overlaps a little bit with the Colorado Sunshine Law. We got CORA, the Open Records Act, Sunshine Law, the Open Meetings Law. And the Open Meetings Law defines a meeting as any gathering of, again, 3 or more of you. You know that now. It's drilled into your brains. And that includes, under the express terms of the statute, electronic meetings. And that doesn't just mean this whole Zoom thing. That means email communications. Chair Vickers is exactly right. If 3 or more of you get on, if you get on an open chat room thread on these little guys, that's an open meeting under the Sunshine Law. So don't get on a group text thread. And same thing with emails. When 3 or more of you email on something and reply all to each other, that could be a meeting. And if you start emailing, good point, Chair, about substantive things, not just like, where are we tonight? You know, are we virtual or in person? Nah, that's not going to get you in trouble. Hey, you know, I think what do you all think about the COA and this particular material? Nah, that's going to get you in trouble. So those can be meetings, and we haven't noticed them. The public can't view them. They're going to get you in trouble under the public meetings law. Well, they'll also get, well, no, they won't get you in trouble under CORA, but they're discoverable under CORA, which could lead to incredible embarrassment under CORA. Again, Colorado Open Records Act. So the final point I will make before there are any more questions is that in addition to the implication of a potential meeting happening, well, hey, let's say you're cognizant of that, and Mike emails Patty one-on-one and says, and that meeting last night was awful, wasn't it? I can't believe, whatever. And da 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 da. Because, that's so Mike style. No. So what if you were to email Patty and just sort of say, these are the things I want to vent about, or that I think went wrong, or that I want to criticize in terms of how things were presented or how things went. Well, there's not a sunshine law implication because it's one-on-one. However, Mike would never do that, and actually I know none of you would either. One, because you probably are just, better. But two, I'm also here to tell you, if you were to email something like that to a fellow commission member about something that happened at a commission meeting, whether you use an Idaho Springs Co. email or whether you use your personal email account, if you email each other or anybody about your role and your job and what you do as a commission member, that could be subject to public view and public request. 9 News, the press, the Current, whoever wants to request all the commissioners' emails over the last month to see what they can dig up, they get those emails. So clearly, don't ever say anything in an email. Rachel, is that a cat or a dog? Hello, is that a puppy?
Sorry, it's an old man dog. He's like 16.
Hello. Sorry, I saw ears and they were the cutest ears.
He's been running around the house frantically, and I was like, I guess I need to pick him up. He's driving me nuts.
That's a good pivot point. Hello. Oh, you're adorable. Hello. So don't ever email anything that you wouldn't want to be, quite frankly, in the newspaper, because it could be. Everything that you do now, all the communications you have as a commissioner are subject to public records laws. That's a big deal if you're not at all used to that and you're not sort of constantly checking yourself and thinking. I constantly email government employees, so I'm always sort of thinking about it, and I forget. A lot of people don't. We have gotten so not only used to text, but email as conversation, right? Remember when it was new and you'd sort of like sincerely on your email, and it was all like a letter. Emails are very conversational. Don't let that lull you into a sense of you can just sort of talk like maybe you would talk. Those are public records, and they can be requested by the newspaper, and we'd have to give them up. So keep that in mind. Okay, that was a long time, and I'm sorry, but you had great questions. If I can answer anything else now, let me know. If not, and you have future questions, get them to Jared or Andy, and I'll get them to me. Okay, thanks everyone. You do important stuff, and we're, as a city, we're grateful for all of you. Thank you for being on this commission, eventually, Rachel, on this commission. Again, we're here for you as staff. Let me know if I can help.
Thank you, Carmen. That was really good to get that review. So, all right, it looks like the next thing on our agenda is the synopsis of the Saving Places Conference. I was not able to attend this year, but Jared, I think staff went, correct?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Vickers. We did have a few attendees. We had about 7, I believe. So Member Manifold, now Council Person Manifold attended. Patty Tyler in our office attended. The mayor, Chuck Harmon, attended the session. Wonder Martell attended virtually. Administrator Marsh, Assistant Administrator Kane, and myself, we all attended. So it was a fantastic conference. There were 2 days in person. So first day was, this was last Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So Monday and Tuesday were in person. Wednesday was a remote session. One of the reasons for this review is not only to provide you a little bit of an update as to what occurred at the conference, some of the new fun things that we learned, but it's also part of our reporting back to the state to keep our certified local government status as well. So just to go over a few highlights quickly, the keynote speaker for the first day was a woman that was working on a very interesting project throughout the United States, and that project was to find and document slave houses. So she had found a number of slave houses, as I mentioned, throughout the states, mostly in Virginia was kind of where it seemed to be really focused, but she was broadening out that search. She even found one in Oregon. So if anybody has any tips, I'm sure she would be very interested to find anything in Colorado. A lot of that research was based around, or that her interest in it was based around the structures themselves, how they were constructed, some of the unique features of rooms under the floors that individuals would be able then to have some form of privacy, or hope to have some form of privacy. And then also some of the workmanship and what status the structure itself was in, and then trying to save them. So that was a very interesting discussion. Several of the other topics were potential future grants, talking about how best to apply for those. So we're looking into following up on those items. There were the Haynes were in attendance and provided a wonderful presentation regarding their work on the Tabor Opera House in Leadville. That was very interesting. And in conjunction with their presentation was also another short presentation regarding a former town that was located just east of Greeley, that was a majority, well, it was set out as an African-American settling town, and how it had thrived, a lot of the history behind it, and the three structures that still remain there. Unfortunately, the economics of the Dust Bowl did not, play kindly towards this town, and they and it ceased to exist, but did have some structural remains there. We also had another great session regarding just additions in general, and what people throughout municipalities in Colorado were seeing regarding additions to historic structures. So yeah, as I mentioned, I certainly, being my first time, really got a lot out of that conference. We do intend to work towards attending, on an annual basis. We have applied in the past and intend to in the future to the scholarship program for this that allows for commissioners to attend. And there is a little bit of homework, but then we apply for reimbursement then through History Colorado. So it's been a good program to work with them on. If I may jump back just a touch in the training realm, I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I put together a quick little document also. I just wanted to let some of the newer members know, and I know Mr. Davenport knows this quite well, but the City of Idaho Springs has an historic district. We're currently working on a survey plan that may recommend doing some historic surveying of other parts of town in the future, which could lead to expansion of or addition to some historic designations. And then those would also be under that COA criteria in the future if they want to do external changes. And really what we have several guiding documents. One is the Secretary of Interior Standards. That's kind of the overarching guiding document. But then the City of Idaho Springs also has their own design guidelines for historic structures. And some things do change for contributing versus non-contributing structures. Like I said, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on that this evening. If you want to know more, please let me know. But then we also have local historic documents that we reference when a COA is requested. And through Mike's work, some Sanborn maps that are really helpful to see what was basically the footprint of a building at different periods of time. So we consult those as well. And then, staff's role, just really quickly wanted to go over staff's role in this, is to field any inquiries about potential COAs and then help those applicants through that process. So I know I did that really quick. You can always ask me any questions on that too. But if I may, the last item on the agenda, if I may, Chair Vickers, proceed there. The last item on the agenda is a discussion about the timing of our meetings. We here as staff are more than happy to continue the third Tuesday of the month at 5:15. However, I know that we've had some changes in attendees, and then some of the attendees have some changes in circumstances that may merit looking at the time of our meetings. So if anyone has any suggestions regarding, right now we meet at 5:15. Would you like to meet at 5, 6, 5:30, or keep it at 5:15? I'm more than happy to hear any comments in that regard.
Patty? I can't hear Patty. Can anyone else hear her?
I'm also unable to hear Patty.
Patty will come speak over here. Hold, please.
So far away.
Hold on. Oh, wait.
It's magic.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay, since we're both in the office, we got like dueling jamboree going on
Microphones.
here, so
There's feedback.
so the reason we meet at 5:15 is because when I initially joined, the meetings were at 5 o'clock and I couldn't walk down from my office fast enough to get here at 5 o'clock. So we met at 5:30. Since I no longer have that issue because we're all doing remote, it would work easier for me if we were a little bit later. So instead of being in the office and having the meeting, I would have time to go home, situate myself. And granted, that's being a little bit selfish, but I think 5:15 is early for a meeting, and 6 I think would be good. 7's too late. So that's my personal opinion.
Mike?
When do you expect to go back to in-person meetings?
That's a fantastic question, Mike. I think that's something that the commission can discuss as well. But I do know that the city council is going to take up that matter here at their next work session and give staff some direction as to how they wish to proceed in the near future.
I will throw out there, I know somebody else who's very interested in joining the HPRC, but she has commitments on Tuesday evenings, and so she would prefer a later start time. And again, 7 is kind of what her ideal, but I don't know, that's really late. So if we're on Zoom, it doesn't really matter to me because I can put my kids to bed while I'm on the computer. If we're back in person, 7 is probably too late for me.
And I don't believe there's anything that says that we can't be flexible. If we come up with a time that we want to pursue, and then that ends up not functioning the best, we just have to know, a meeting or two in advance, just so when I do have posting requirements and things of that nature, I can abide by them.
So I guess Mike and Rachel, what works best for you guys?
It's pretty flexible for me, both in terms of time or day of the week. I work more than 90% of the time at home, so that gives me a pretty flexible schedule.
At this time, I don't really know. I'm pretty open most days of the week. I'm just thinking about, if we meet at 7 and the meeting goes till 8, probably won't be eating dinner until 9. It just seems kind of difficult, but if that's a time that works for most people, then be flexible. It's just once a month, right?
And Lisa, I know you're here right now. What would you prefer?
I am pretty open. I already meet every Monday at 7, so I'm used to the 7. But my goal, and I will tell you guys this, I would like you guys to get to 5 members without me so that I can step away, because going back to what Carmen said about the appearance of impropriety, I know over the last year we've seen a lot of city projects that are looking for COAs, and I feel like being on the council and being one of the group that even just being here on this commission as one of the group who would be approving or not approving a COA for a city project, that to me starts to feel a little sticky. So I don't want to leave you guys without a quorum, but once we have 5 members, I'm going to step back. So you guys make a decision and I'll go along with it for as long as I'm with you.
It kind of sounds to me, I mean, there's some flexibility, but it sounds like we all think maybe 7 o'clock is too late. Yes, ladies, I see you. Do we want to do 6? I mean, 6 to me seems like we can still get done in time for dinner, but late enough you can get home from work. Jared, does that work for you too? And
Absolutely.
okay. All right, so I think let's keep the 3rd Tuesday. I think that's pretty established and
Yeah.
it's on all of our calendars like that. So let's move it to 6 and try that and see how that goes. And I'll let this other person know. Lisa, you hands up. You're muted.
Oh, she's saying bye.
Oh,
No, I'm not saying bye. I was
Okay,
saying
sorry.
I wanted to circle back around to something once you were done. I apologize. I thought you were finished.
oh no, I was just rambling. Go ahead.
No. What I wanted to go back to something that Jared was talking about with the Saving Places conference. Next year, if you're able to go, you should go. Even though I attended it remotely, it was amazing. And one of the things that I really was struck by that I saw as a thread in a lot of the presentations that I went to was we're not the only city that's struggling with additions, and how do we manage like an addition that's 90 years old versus the 130-year-old house. And how do we manage it with our current, specific Idaho Springs guidelines and the Secretary of Interior guidelines. And I heard more than one presenter say, the Secretary of guidelines say A, and we have to do A, we must do A. And then over here, they're like, well, what about B? And don't worry about A. So we're not the only ones struggling with that. I think that is definitely something for us to look at as far as our design guidelines, and I loved the woman who was on the Aspen historic preservation. Boy, that woman was a pistol, and she's dealing with a lot more pushback, I think, than we have ever gotten. I have a great respect for that, but I think looking at some of those other cities and how they have managed that would be good for us, because I know we've talked about revamping our design guidelines, and that might be a good way to look at it, because I think some of the things that we've seen over the last year, and I keep saying this and I'll keep saying it, we're going to keep seeing, with the 90-year-old addition and the 130-year-old house. But the conference next year, guys, you should all go. It was amazing. It was amazing.
I will echo that. And I was really disappointed this year I couldn't go, but I've been going to that conference for years. And I will straight up tell you it's the most valuable conference I've ever attended.
Yeah.
Out of all the ones I've been going to in my career, that one has the most useful information.
And I'll kind of reiterate with Lisa, is one of the things that I really liked and saw is that not everything is black and white. There is a little bit of gray in there, and we tend to forget that. We tend to just be, you got to do it the way the standards are. And everybody was like, yeah, the standards are old. There's a little bit of room, as long as it conforms to mostly what needs to be done. There is a little bit of leeway, which I had never heard before. And that was really the whole gist of the conference, is not everything is exactly black and white. There's a little bit of room for movement.
Well,
like the rest of life.
Go ahead, Megan.
Oh, I was just saying, you're amazing, like the rest of life.
Definitely. And within the period of significance, that's where they all kept coming back to, where we have determined our period of significance is that seemed like it was the touchstone for a lot of these historic preservation boards and commissions, regardless of what the guidelines said. If there was a question, you would lean back on the period of significance, which was not something that I have heard so far.
Mhm.
There's also a document, I've got copies of it, called the Interpretations. And these are the interpretations by the National Park Service of applications that come to them for getting tax credits. There's about 80 of them that were done over a number of years. And often in other places where I've been the staff, they help in some of the most difficult decisions. And one of the interesting things I found is they talked about there's always the best solution, but there may be a second or third acceptable way of doing something. And most guidelines don't mention that, but I thought that was quite interesting. That was in the interpretations.
Great.
And one other thing I'll also mention is that there is a national conference of historic preservation boards. It occurs every 2 years. This year it's in June in Cincinnati. And those are, it's actually better than the National Trust Conference, the National Trust for Historic Preservation Conference. It's a way of actually, well, obviously you're hearing from people from all over the country, but it's very well focused on what does a historic board need to know.
Thanks, Mike. Jared, I saw your hand up.
Yep, I just wanted to summarize our time discussion. It sounded like we had settled on 6 o'clock for the foreseeable future anyway. Just wanted to make sure I reiterated that correctly on the 3rd Tuesday. So we'll make that change here in-house. So.
Perfect. And I was gonna say, if there's nothing else, we could end on that our next meeting is going to be March 15th at 6 p.m.
Yeah, just to let you all know too, currently I do not have an application yet, so there's a chance that might be canceled. We do, of course, need to get a certain number of meetings in for our CLG status, and it is for our quadrennial review period for our CLG status. So we will have somebody from the state attending one of our meetings in the future.
Is it excuse me, sorry. What's the deadline for applications to come in? Is it 5 days before?
Oh, no, it's more than that because there is a posting requirement. So we try to do a month in advance.
Okay.
But sometimes we can be a little flexible based on the notice criteria. So we still have to put the sign in the ground 14 days in advance, et cetera.
Okay. All right, so we may or may not meet, but if we do, it's March 15th at 6 p.m. Anything else tonight before we adjourn? Great, thank you. Welcome, Mike. Rachel, unofficial welcome for right now. Thank you guys so much, and have a good rest of your evening.